Good afternoon, everyone. Today's video is going to be all about Microsoft, and I'll share the different reasons why I think Microsoft is next up on the chopping block in terms of stocks likely to get hit from this recent sell-off. Now, the way I've laid out this video is in two different parts. In the first part, I'll share these reasons. I'll try to go through them fairly quickly. And in the second part, we'll build an actual trade strategy to take advantage of this move tomorrow if we do see the selling continue. Now, first part is laying out the different reasons why I think Microsoft is likely to fall, so let's get started there. Now, first off, we have earnings coming up, and that is our natural catalyst, right? That's something we all look at, and if you've been following Microsoft for any length of time, you know, for the most part, Microsoft has been a poster child in terms of that very easy trade for a rally into earnings. In fact, we can prove that with some data if I load in our pre-earnings analysis indicator. This is free for all Volatility Box members, and you can download it off of our URL, tosindicators.com/indicator/pre-earnings, and click this download button. That will give you the indicator to follow along. But if I click apply, what you should see is for the past 5 years, Microsoft has tended to rise into earnings 70% of the time and tends to fall into earnings only about 30% of the time. Right now, it's looking very likely that we're in that 30% bucket, meaning what tends to typically happen is not happening in this current case. And that to me is clue number one. Now, if I remove this, let me continue on with the other signs that I'm also seeing. If you take some of the recent swings in this overall uptrend and we try and extrapolate that from our recent high, we've broken past 1, 2, and 3 swings, and we've tried to at least hold them as support. We can see that here, bounced a couple times, but ultimately ended up falling down. The last and final fib retracement level that we have, or the one that at least I could find, is hovering near that 291.49 mark, and that's using that Feb to March swing high to swing low extrapolated from where we're currently at. Feb 2020, March 2020, we use that swing and we extrapolate it from where we're currently at. That gives us that downside price target of 291.49, which means I think there's still a lot more downside left before we see any kind of buyers come into play. We can also see that with today's price action, where buyers tried to close above this 313.06 mark, very obviously failed. Sellers had full control here, and so far it looks to me like this is a very bearish candle, suggesting more downside activity. Now, the last most obvious signs are the fact that we're in a decelerating trend. Our market pulse line has gone red, suggesting we're in that stage of deceleration. And until we start to see that flat line out, to me, Microsoft is still more in a bearish trend, likely to see more selling continue as opposed to some sort of a stall where buyers come in. So that's laid out some of the different signs that I'm looking at inside of Microsoft. But now the question comes in, well, how do we take advantage of this move? So for that, let's move on to a smaller time frame chart here. I'll come into a 1-minute time frame, and I have our volatility box loaded on, which gives us a framework around price and volatility. Now, for all of our stock volatility box members, Microsoft is a stock on our nightly trending list for tonight. For those of you that are new or unfamiliar with the nightly trending list, I'll leave some videos in the description box which covers examples of the setup both before and after, so you know exactly what the trigger conditions are and how the setup has worked out in the past. Microsoft has not really been on our nightly trending list for as long as I can remember, but it is on that list tonight, and that means we now have a trade framework that we can take advantage of. Now, in terms of our selling activity inside of Microsoft, if we break below the outer edge of our clouds, which is at 301.90, that's the exact price, $301.90, and we do so in the first 15 minutes after the bell rings tomorrow, so that's by 6:45 a.m. Pacific, well, to me, that's going to be the sign that sellers have resumed selling activity inside of Microsoft, and they've taken back that same control that buyers tried to come in here in the final 5 or so minutes where they tried to stop price action. That to me would say buyers have just lost control and sellers are going to continue to bring Microsoft down lower. So again, this is a sell stop order outside of 301.90 if we break that level within the first 15 minutes. Now, in terms of our stop, you have two natural places that you could put it. The first is our pivot point right here below or above, the most recent high, which was 303.82. So above 303.82, for those of you that would like to keep your risk fairly small on this trade, hug that stop. and see if we can get that nice flush move down lower. That would be that stop that you could use. For those of you willing to give this trade a bit more room, the other stop is at above our grade target line, which is at 304.50. So you have two different levels based off of the risk tolerance you're willing to give it at. So far we know our entry, which is a break below 301.90 in the first 15 minutes. We know the two potential places you can put your stop based off of your risk tolerance. In terms of our downside target, the bare minimum for me is always at least a 1-to-1 risk to reward ratio, which means we'd be targeting that same zone. So for example, using that 303.82, that's right around a $2 risk in Microsoft, meaning we're looking for that same $2 move on the downside, which takes us to that nice round even number of 300. I do imagine we see some buyers come into play at 300, so that would very clearly be at least the first place to take some money or some shares off the table. Now for our second target, for those of you willing to hold on a little bit longer, I still think it's likely we hit 291.49, and maybe even earnings serves as the catalyst to take us into that level. Seems really strange betting against Microsoft headed into earnings, but I'm just looking at what the chart is telling us and going on the basis of that without trying to overthink this trade too much. So that's the trade I'm looking at inside of Microsoft. It's on our nightly trending list, looking to take advantage of the fact that with it being on the nightly trending list, we have a very clear setup. We have a very clear entry and a way to try and take advantage of this move. And we know our exact criteria in terms of entry, stops, and targets. And those targets overlap nicely with a nice round number of 300, along with our lower Fibonacci zone, 291.49. The last thing I'll also conclude this video with is XLK, which looks equally bearish but has now officially closed outside of the 3 Keltner channel bands. So we may start to see a little bit of a pause here, and for XLK, that Fibonacci support is at 157.94. So still below, and if we break below even that, well, that opens up more bearish opportunities inside of other tech stocks as well. I hope you found today's video to be useful for those of you looking for a trade for tomorrow, one that you can take advantage of with a very concrete entry, stop, and target. All right, take care everyone, good luck trading, and we'll see you in the next update.